Hello, everyone. Welcome back. In this episode, I will talk about what I promised last week, which is the nature of our emotions and how everything is emotional and how. Now, if somebody had told me this 15 years ago, I probably would have rejected the idea partially, not fully, because all my life I have been a very sensitive and very emotional kid. And I developed shame around emotions. I developed shame around feeling emotions. And that was obviously because I had experiences, I was told certain things, I have perceived those things. One of the main characters was my mom, who told me, to just shove it down, and certain expressions were nonsense. And the reason why I am making this podcast is because I see that millions, actually billions of people are suffering today from the same thing. The fear of emotions, the fear of expressions, but it really isn't the fear of emotions, it is the fear of not knowing what to make of them. And I decided to record this podcast for you guys so that you will have a deeper an understanding of what this all means and where they come from, and why the worst thing that we could do is denying our emotions. And I'll help you shift a few beliefs around it, because if you don't shift those beliefs, if you keep denying your emotions, it will lead to self-destruction, relationship problems, health problems, and eventually financial problems. So in my many decades of life experience, I have learned how all of our decisions are made and based on emotions. And the way we store the past, the way we perceive life, will influence those decisions. And I will get into all this, okay? So I want to talk about money, and then jobs, career, and then also talk about relationships and talk about health, how those areas of our lives get affected by emotions, and will demystify a lot of these things. The other day I spoke with a young man who was struggling with irritable bowel syndrome and excruciating pains, and I can certainly relate because I had that for 20 years, and I was curled up on the floor in a Boston apartment, and no one could help me. No one would even understand what I was going through, the struggles. And then one GI doctor in a very prestigious Boston hospital looked at me and said, "You're perfectly fine physically, it's emotional." And he suggested for me to meditate. And at the time, that was like 20 years ago roughly, it didn't make sense because I knew or heard of meditation, but I didn't know how to specifically meditate, because meditation is just a tool. But since then, as I have made this my life mission to decode my physical pain, my health issues, heal my relationship challenges, as well as my financial challenges, I understand now the million intricacies of the human mind, the tricks of the ego, and how pretty much all adverse circumstances in our lives come from our unhandled emotional baggage. So I am making this episode, guys, with not just an incredible life experience and textbook and all the learnings, but also with heart, because I am today at the age of 52. I feel amazing. I have never felt this peace and full and calm in my body. I have never felt so healthy and vital, and all of that was because of the deep unconscious work I have done on myself, how I decoded the nooks and the crannies of the human mind. And I could literally tell you what causes what, and I could have like the million-piece recipes. But before I dive in, let me ask you a question. How do you make decisions? We all make decisions, right? But decisions are those turning points in life when we can leave an old idea, an old place, an old energy behind, and then we embark on something good, something new rather. And if you don't make decisions, then nothing's going to change. And that's the first thing that people need to know, is that without decisions, there's no flow, right? But the question here is, how do you make decisions? When you make them, are you excited? Or are you enthusiastic? It's like, yes, that's what I want. I really want that. I'm making a decision to become something I haven't been, to make a decision to obtain something, attain something. Or when you make a decision, are you annoyed or irritated, right? Sometimes it's both. For most people, they only make decisions when, they're annoyed or irritated, when it's coming from a negative place. And the reason why I am saying these words precisely because I would like you to really start seeing how these are emotional words. Annoyed, irritated, enthusiastic, excited. These are all emotions, right? So however we feel, we make appropriate decisions about. And since so many people, this is going to be an uneducated guess, but probably about 50% of this planet's population is horrified of their emotions. And probably the same people will make decisions based out of negative emotions or avoidance or annoyance or pain. How do you make decisions? What makes you make a decision? What is guiding you? And also what I have noticed, the people that are not knowledgeable about the domain of emotions, the domain of the unconscious world, they eventually tend to burn out or become highly apathetic or unemotional. And that eventually leads to deadness. And all of these are emotional words too. Apathy, just because it says the lack of emotion, it's still an emotional word, right? And from here on, you could see that every decision you make is emotional. Just become aware of that, okay? So, for example, those of you that are in the job market or looking for a job or reading job descriptions, have you looked at a job description that looked good, sounded good, and as you were reading on, all of a sudden there were a few requirements that go, ugh, that's not me. Okay, so then you go, no, it's not me, and you move on. Okay, but why do you move on? I'm not saying it's a bad decision, but I'm just wanting you to expand your mind a little bit. Why did you decide to move on? What was the emotion? And very often we don't even know why we move on. And this could be in the context of dating too. Why do we move on? Because somehow emotionally we didn't feel that we were the right fit. We didn't feel the job was the right fit. We didn't feel that the money was enough. Maybe unconsciously, and this is many, many layers removed, we may not have the qualifications. That's what our logical mind would say. But deep down we may feel, and listen to my language, may feel that we are not good enough for that job. You see, a lot of these deep limiting beliefs and these self-concepts determine how far we read or how far we listen. Because at one point, our internal triggers or our internal barometer, the measurement system gets triggered, and then we either move on and continue pursuing it, or we check out and make a decision about something else. But my whole point, my whole teaching is why. And you might have seen memes I posted on LinkedIn or Facebook. It's like, it's not enough to see what you're doing. If you really want to master life, you got to figure out why you do what you do. Okay, the why is sort of the engine. That's the genius behind everything, because it is so convoluted, it is so complex. But when you start seeing, like, I am making this decision because I feel blank, right? And all of a sudden you realize that everything is really guided by an internal emotional a place, even if it's not very logical at first, okay? So when we make decisions, we feel something and we respond to the feeling. And the same thing, guys, back in the context of work or money, is the same way how we get hired. Now, imagine that you go to a job interview and you feel like a downer. You kicked your toe in the morning and, the taxi, ran over your suitcase or whatever, right? So it's a crappy day. Now, how do you feel? We carry the feeling into the subsequent parts of the day. And are you a downer? Are you a pessimist, right? As a consequence. If we do that, then of course, the decisions that we are going to make or the decisions that other people will make on our behalf or for us are going to be a reflection of our negative emotions of feeling like a pessimist, being a downer, and so on and so forth. However, on the flip side, if we are enthusiastic and we feel upbeat and we have a good attitude, then our entire life changes. Good attitude is like a key. If I could simplify things, and keep it extremely tight, a good attitude is something that when we have it, when we are able to find it and hold it, then it will result in amazing things in our lives. So that will translate to good health, good money, good relationships. But again, it takes inner work and subconscious work to attain a good attitude. All right. So a couple questions I can have you write down, because these are always good ones to check in and detangle some of your internal thinking processes and your unconscious world. Like, do you care? When you embark on a mission, when you embark on the next step, when you make a decision, when you do something, do you care? And how much? Sometimes we care way too much, and that also comes in because we feel guilty, because we feel like if we didn't care, we would be perceived as selfish. Sometimes we care because we feel self-sacrificial. But if you work through those things, you leave all of the egoic manipulative aspects behind, and you really start doing things that come from the heart, and you really, really care. You absolutely immerse yourself and enjoy what you do. Watch what happens. Watch the amazing things that will happen. Okay? So you have to care about the right things, care about being able to feel good about yourself, feel good about what you do. But you shouldn't care about what other people think of you. You shouldn't care about, certain things that would be lowering your vibration. So that should make sense. And in the context of money and in the context of wealth, there are a couple additional emotional questions, but listen to this. How do you feel about money? What are your immediate thoughts about money? How do you feel? And, you might want to sit with that question a little bit, because most people, I have found this, that, they are starting to get it. That our quick, immediate, unconscious answers are the ones that create our reality. They are the ones that create our life. That's the one that runs the show. Those are the ones that run the show. And again, these are feelings. How do you feel about money? If you feel good about earning, if you feel good about making money, you will go for it. You will claim it, right? But if you feel guilty, or if you feel that money is this and that, then you're going to have dissonance. You're going to have rejection about it. Another question that's very good is, how do you feel about rich people? Most people feel incredibly deep negative emotions about them. And if you want to be rich, you can't feel negative emotions. You can't have those negative emotions. Those are your beliefs about rich people. And remember, you can only feel negative emotions when you have limiting beliefs about people, events, or circumstances, or yourself. Okay? So how do you feel about rich people? And why? Who taught you that? When did you decide that feeling negative or being angry with someone who has something you could potentially want is a bad thing? You see, these are our limiting beliefs, our inner belief structure that literally guide us or make us decide. Even though in our heart we know what we want, it will not be decided upon, because our limiting beliefs and our subconscious structures will make the decisions for us. The next question is, how do you feel about wealth? Similar, some people have a huge problem with the word wealth or wealthy. These are your beliefs, right? And when you shift the beliefs, all of a sudden you could see them as, holy cow, I'm glad they exist, because without them, who would offer any positive example, any possibility? You see, the human mind is so complex, and we've been conditioned for thousands of years to kind of marinate in our own junk. And we have gotten to a point where we are so stuck in our thinking patterns that if somebody doesn't punch us or pull us out of this circle of destruction, we will continue self-destructing. And that's why I'm asking these questions. What do you think about money? How do you feel about rich people? How do you feel about wealth? Right? How do you feel about the poor? And these are not quick answers. These are not something that you could complete in 5 seconds. You might want to sit with them. Might want to sit with these answers, because if you start writing them down, you should have 20, 30 answers to every or each question. And then you're going to start spewing out some of your very deep neurological connections, and you haven't even realized that those are the ones that you carry, and those are the ones that make decisions for you, and those are the ones that influence your life. And that's why a lot of our past experiences, including our family patterns, are repeating. As long as we say, or you say that, oh, we've always done it this way. Well, great. Is it working out? Is it working for you, right? If yes, then keep doing it. If not, then something needs to change, right? So this section was about the money. Go back and listen to this again. This has been obviously huge. It liberated me from hundreds of destructive cycles, and some of it was something that I created in moments of difficulties. Some of my troubles were family oriented, were ancestral. So you need to explore where your stuff comes from and what they mean. Okay, so now I'm going to transition to the next piece, the second, which is the context of relationships and the emotions. Okay, why do people get into a relationship? Okay, you could think back of a relationship where you got into, and don't judge anything, just examine that. And you got into the relationship because you felt how? Notice the word feel or felt. Okay, you felt excited. You felt in love. You felt amazed. You felt invigorated. All these are emotional words. Again, anything that we are not comfortable with, anything that we are not willing to accept, it will force itself upon us and it will make us accept it, even if it has to kill us or crush us. Okay? This is huge. Anything that we are not willing to accept, anything that we fight, anything that we resist or reject the idea of, will eventually gain power over us and will crush us. And it will come out in the form of all sorts of sabotage. So that's why it's important that you face these fears, you face your unwanted or uncomfortable topics, perhaps, because that will indicate that you are avoiding something. Maybe there was a story that was unhealed. Maybe there was something that you witnessed and you decided you never want to be that. But again, anything that we decide to never want to be, we eventually start creating a life about that. And as you were deciding, to enter a relationship because you felt amazed and invigorated, did you have any kind of fears in the back? Of course, most people are not very conscious of their fears. But if you have had different relationships and you already broke up a few times, then you understand is that we always have, elements of fear, a little bit of concern. How long will this last? Where will it lead to? Will I be able to trust this person? Will he or she do the same as the previous one, right? So there's all these concerns and fears. And there are additional emotions in the background in the context of relationships that we consider unconsciously, but most people are not able to articulate them. Some of these fears is that missing out on love. It's a fear. What is a feeling? I want to be loved. But if the people carry the beliefs and the emotions that they are not lovable or they don't deserve to be loved, they will manifest a life around it. So it's important to reshape your internal beliefs. Okay? Some people, and actually most of us, have a fear of not being able to grow spiritually with our partner. These are far outside of the visible range on a radar screen, but this is a legit fear, not being able to grow spiritually with a partner. Some people have a very huge fear about not having children or not being able to have children. It's a big problem in relationships. Some people have a problem or fear, concern about getting old alone. All of these are feelings. Fear is a feeling, right? And when you are able to start seeing that everything we create in life, everything that you create in life is a response to how you were feeling in the moment, what feelings you're carrying through time and space, then you can, start appreciating that your feelings determine the outcomes. Therefore, if you shift or reshape your feelings, they will be able to give you a different outcome, okay? So some people also have fear or concern about not leaving a legacy. Okay, this was huge for me. And why? Well, we are all here to do something great, way beyond what our conditioned mind sort of gives us a vision to or access to. But deep in a very, very soul level, we want to leave a legacy. We want to make an impact. And there's additional fears of not being able to grow with the partner. I mentioned this in the spiritual context, but also in just growing and enjoying life together, growing as a friendship. Okay, most relationships end up self-destructing because, I mentioned this in a previous podcast episode, that relationships are not physical in nature, they are spiritual in nature. And the number one thing in every relationship is to heal each other. Well, the healing has to be emotional healing. And since most people have no idea what that means and what it looks like, we avoid the very thing that we formed the relationship about. And then, of course, it's destined to fall apart. Okay? So it's important to know that all of these feelings shape how your life unfolds. And then you can start not changing the life circumstance by force, but rather go back and reshape your feelings, reshape your thinking, because the feelings are byproducts of your thinking, and then your life circumstance will adjust. All right. Now, people who are not in a relationship, say they're single, right? I see this too, that some people are saying, I'm proudly single. It's like, well, that's not an achievement, right? We all want to be in relationships. We all want to be ideally in a good relationship. So what's the feeling behind being single out of that place, out of that? It's defense. It's a defensive behavior, defensive emotion, right? Why? Well, because they might have been hurt in past relationships. And there's the word hurt, emotional word. Maybe they had enough. This is what the ego likes to do. Like they talk, I had enough. But you had enough because, well, then comes all kinds of stories and all kinds of limiting beliefs, right? Because they might not feel lovable. They might not feel worthy of a good relationship. And all of those are limiting beliefs. But inside the limiting beliefs, they have the deep sadness or the deep sorrow, which then creates their life circumstance, okay? So a lot of the people are reliving, unconsciously reliving family patterns. I see this a lot, guys, is that many people are so afraid of the family's judgments. There's so much judgment and so much like intolerance of something new, something maybe outside the box. So if you feel like you're afraid of family's judgment, it is your perception. It is your job to outgrow that. Some people break out of that pattern with aggression. They call it boundary time. Yeah, it is boundary time, but the real boundaries, the spiritual boundaries, are done through inner work and not through this anger and the rage, right? Maybe that's the good first step that you need to take, to say no, enough is enough, but then you have to heal what you have to heal so you will no longer be held hostage by your emotions, all right? And some people say, in the context of relationships, I haven't found the right one. Again, these are all internal belief systems, and life responds to our beliefs. Whatever you believe about people, yourself, the opposite gender, the same gender, those will add up and will create this interesting complex thing we call life. So I'm going to transition into the third part of this presentation in this podcast, which is about health. And the emotions in the context of health is a little bit trickier because most people talk about stress. And of course, it now has been accepted, the notion has been accepted that stress is bad for our health, right? You heard it, you experienced it. When you stress too much, you feel certain tightness in the chest perhaps, or, stress is very complex. It's an umbrella term. And then the question is, why does it create health problems and how? And that's where I specialize in. Like when people come to me and they say, I'm stressed, okay, that is not very meaningful. I say, what specific problems are you dealing with today? Is it in the area of health, relationship, or finances? In most cases, it's at least one, but they will eventually bleed over into the other. So when people say stress, it's an emotional word. I feel stressed. Okay, it's a gross generalization, but when you break it down, then all of a sudden it will give you access to healing. It will give you access to changing or shifting your life around, because as long as we generalize and as long as we are not willing or able to see or not know the subtle details that build up to the big thing, the big idea, then we will be lacking the resources or lacking the answer rather to see what causes our condition and how we can undo it and then create something better. Okay? So in other words, underneath the stress, there are thousands of stories and thousands of beliefs which create different health conditions. And this was mine too. When I had a stroke at the age of 42, it was not because of bad diet. It was not because I wasn't exercising. I was super fit. I was very smart. I did everything right, according to the book. It was because I felt thousands and thousands of emotions that were unreleased. And I mentioned this in the previous podcast on the July 1st episode, how these negative emotions don't dissolve, they don't decompose. In fact, they become more and more aggressive. So that's why a methodical approach of working through them and releasing them is paramount, because if we don't do that, then we're going to have a runaway train hitting us and it hurts. So I'm going to give you guys a couple examples here. People, for example, who have liver or problems with their liver, there's a lot of anger. Most of it is unconscious. they will act it out. But as you have heard from my previous podcast, a lot of these emotions we try to mask, because who wants to be angry all the time? It hurts, right? It hurts our heart too. So what we do, we try to layer in additional cover-up stories and masks, but the original anger or the rage underneath is still alive. That's why you have to address the real stuff, the deep unconscious stuff, and not talk about the symptoms. And that's what I mean when I always say people talk. They talk about the symptom, and they have not the first clue, not the first idea of where, that it's only a mask. The symptom is just a result. And if you want to change the result, you have to change the components, the ingredients of the soup. If you don't like the taste, change the ingredients. You have to add or subtract. So when people have anger issues or liver problems, then it can lead back to a lot of, stories about anger. And then you have to know the psychology of anger, what creates anger. People who have problems with lungs or difficulty, they harbor a lot of sadness and sorrow. People who have kidney problems, they have typically relationship problems. They're not happy, or some aspect of their relationship, at least one aspect of the relationship is problematic. So you go back and you heal that aspect, the emotional aspect of it, and then the body heals. Quite often we feel unloved, we feel alone, and these also add up to incredibly complex and very serious health conditions. And this may or may not be evident. I have had 10 years experience with it. I work with thousands of clients, and I've been teaching live seminars and help people overcome this. When we were ridiculed or embarrassed as children, that carries on and creates all kinds of immune system deficiencies, the ridicule and embarrassment. So you see, all of these harbored / stored / unreleased emotions will build up to something illogical, complex, illogical, and convoluted. And anything that's not working in life is just simply a symptom, simply an indication that in our emotional world, in our unconscious world, things need to change. Cool? So that's all. So don't look at a problem as a problem. Look at it as an indication. It's kind of like when a red dashboard light comes on. Maybe the engine overheated. Okay, it looks like a problem, but maybe the coolant is out. All right. So the engine is perfectly fine. You examine, maybe a hose is broken. You fix the hose. You fill it up with coolant, and you're running again. And that's how our mind works. So a lot of these conditions or life challenges are these dashboard lights. They come on for us to become aware of them and then take care of them and then create a better and a different life. And underneath all these guys, underneath all these emotions, things that create negative results, is always guilt. There's ancestral guilt. There is collective guilt. Collective means that everybody has it, and sort of it's like a common theme, but it's very deeply, it's stored far away from the radar screen. So it's like in a faraway warehouse, but it's there. And whenever we feel guilt, our immune system can't function as well. When we feel guilt, we do things out of guilt, and we make decisions not because we want to do something or say something, just because we feel guilty. And this could be leading to being overly self-sacrificial, or could create angry outbursts and all that. So all in all, guys, the purpose of this podcast was for you to find peace with the concept of emotions. It's a very deep world. It's not 100 things, it's thousands of things. But as you embrace the concept, then you will be able to start seeing a very different logic. Because as I mentioned, your life is exactly a very precise, convoluted, and complex result of how you have been feeling. Change your feelings, change your life. Cheers.